About Colonial Williamsburg. Colonial Williamsburg is a living history museum and private foundation presenting a part of the historic district in the city of Williamsburg, Virginia. Its 301-acre 122-ha historic area includes several hundred restored or recreated buildings from the 18th century, when the city was the capital of the colony of Virginia, 17th century, 19th century, and Colonial Revival structures, and more recent reconstructions. The historic area includes three main thoroughfares and their connecting side streets that attempt to suggest the atmosphere and the circumstances of 18th century Americans. Costumed employees work and dress as people did in the era, sometimes using colonial grammar and diction. In the late 1920s, the restoration of Colonial Williamsburg was championed as a way to celebrate patriots and the early history of the United States. Proponents included the Reverend Dr. Goodwin and other community leaders, the Association for the Preservation of Virginia Antiquities, now called Preservation Virginia, the Colonial Dames of America, the Daughters of the Confederacy, the Chamber of Commerce, and other organizations, and John D. Rockefeller Jr. and his wife Abby Aldrich Rockefeller. Along with Jamestown and Yorktown, and the Colonial Parkway, Colonial Williamsburg is part of the historic Triangle in Virginia. The site was once used for conferences by world leaders and heads of state. In 1960, it was designated a National Historic Landmark District. History of Colonial Williamsburg. The Jamestown State House housed Virginia's government in the 1600s, but it burned on October 20, 1698. The legislators consequently moved their meetings to the College of William and Mary in Virginia at Middle Plantation, putting an end to Jamestown's 92-year history as Virginia's capital. In 1699, a group of College of William and Mary students delivered addresses during graduation exercises endorsing proposals to move the capital to Middle Plantation, ostensibly to escape the malaria and the mosquitoes at the Jamestown Island site. Interested Middle Plantation landowners donated some of their holdings to advance the plan. Middle Plantation was renamed Williamsburg by Governor Francis Nicholson in honor of William III of England. Nicholson said that clear and crystal springs burst from the champagne soil of Williamsburg. He had the city surveyed and a grid laid out by Theodoric Bland, taking into consideration the brick college building and the then decaying Bruton Parish Church buildings. The grid seems to have obliterated all but the remnants of an earlier plan that laid out the streets in the monogram of William and Mary, a W superimposed on an M. The main street was named Duke of Gloucester after the eldest son of Queen Anne. Nicholson named the street north of it Nicholson Street, for himself, and the one south of it Francis Street. For 81 years of the 18th century, Williamsburg was the center of government, education, and culture in the colony of Virginia. George Washington, Thomas Jefferson, Patrick Henry, James Monroe, James Madison, George Wythe, Peyton Randolph, Richard Henry Lee, and others furthered the forms of British government in the Commonwealth of Virginia and later helped adapt its preferred features to the needs of the new United States. The government moved to Richmond on the James River in 1780, under the leadership of Governor Thomas Jefferson, to be more central and accessible from western counties and less susceptible to British attack. There it remains today. With the seat of government removed, Williamsburg's businesses floundered or migrated to Richmond, and the city entered a long, slow period of stagnation and decay, although the town maintained much of its 18th century aspect. It was captured by General George McClellan in 1862 and garrisoned during the Civil War, so the town escaped the devastation experienced by other southern cities. Williamsburg relied for jobs on the College of William and Mary, the courthouse, and the Eastern Lunatic Asylum, now Eastern State Hospital. It was said that the 500 crazies of the asylum supported the 500 lazies of the college and town. Colonial-era buildings were modified, modernized, neglected, or destroyed. Development that accompanied construction of a World War I gun cotton plant at nearby Penniman and the coming of the automobile blighted the community, but the town kept its appeal to tourists. By the early 20th century, many older structures were in poor condition, no longer in use, or were occupied by squatters. Restoration and reconstruction. Rockefeller management decided against giving custody of the project to the state-run college, ostensibly to avoid political control by Virginia's Democratic bird machine, but they restored the school's Wren Building, Brafferton House, and President's House. Colonial Williamsburg pursued a program of partial recreation of some of the rest of the town. It featured shops, taverns, and open-air markets in a colonial style. The first lead architect in the project was William G. Perry of Perry, Shaw and Hepburn, with Arthur Asahel Shercliffe as the chief landscape architect. An advisory board of architects was selected to provide guidance for the project. Prominent architects who served on the advisory board included Robert P. Bellows, Fisk Kimball, A. Lawrence Coker, Philip N. Stern, Merrill C. Lee, W. Duncan Lee, Marcellus E. Wright Sr., Edmund S. Campbell, Orrin M. Bullock Jr. and R. E. Lee Taylor. During the restoration, the project demolished 720 buildings that postdated 1790, many of which dated from the 19th century. Some decrepit 18th century homes were demolished, leading to some controversy. The governor's palace and the Capitol building were reconstructed on their sites with the aid of period illustrations, written descriptions, early photographs, and informed guesswork. The grounds and gardens were almost all recreated in authentic Colonial Revival style. The Capitol is a 1930s Beaux-Arts approximation of the 1705 building at the east end of the historic area. It was designed by the architectural firm Perry, Shaw and Hepburn, who had it rebuilt as they thought it should have been, not as it was, despite objections and archaeological evidence to the contrary. The modern reconstruction is off-center, its floor plan is skewed, and its interior is overly elaborate. The 1705 original was an H-shaped brick statehouse with double-apsed, oarsman circular southern facades, but it burned in the 1740s and was replaced by an H-shaped rectangular edifice. In the second building, Patrick Henry protested against the Stamp Act and first spoke against King George. George Mason introduced the Virginia Bill of Rights there, and from it Virginia's government instructed its delegates to the Second Continental Congress to propose national independence. Its likeness only exists in a period woodcut and in architectural renderings considered but shelved by the Restoration. The present building was dedicated with a ceremonial meeting of the Virginia General Assembly on February 24, 1934. Virginia's state legislators have reassembled for a day every other year in the Capitol. Of the approximately 500 buildings reconstructed or restored, 88 are labeled original. They include outbuildings such as smokehouses, privies, and sheds. The foundation reconstructed the Capitol and Governor's Palace on their 18th century foundations and preserved some below-ground 18th century brickwork, classifying them as reconstructions. It rebuilt William and Mary's Wren Building on its original foundation, which burned 4 times in 230 years and was much modified. It saved some above-ground brickwork and classified the result as original. On the western side of the city, beginning in the 1930s, retail shops were grouped under the name Merchants Square to accommodate and mollify displaced local merchants. Increasing rents and tourist-driven businesses eventually drove out all the old-line community enterprises except a dress shop. One of the last to be forced out was a locally popular drugstore complete with lunch counter. Late 20th century. With its historic significance to American democracy, it and the surrounding area was the site of a summit meeting of world leaders, the First World Economic Conference in 1983, and hosted visiting royalty, including King Hussein of Jordan and Emperor Hirohito of Japan. Queen Elizabeth II paid 2 royal visits to Williamsburg during her reign, once in October 1957 and again, in May 2007, both to celebrate the anniversaries of the founding of nearby Jamestown. Are you interested in visiting Colonial Williamsburg? Colonial Williamsburg is a very popular tourist spot, home to a variety of museums and exhibits for adults and children. You can also chat with local historians who explain and demonstrate aspects of daily life during the colonial era. If you're interested in visiting, Colonial Williamsburg is located just off Route 60, and is a 50-minute drive from the center of Richmond, where you can rent a car. There is a large free car park at the visitor center, from which you can walk into town. The town is also located along the Colonial Parkway, which connects Jamestown, Yorktown, and Colonial Williamsburg. The Williamsburg Transportation Center is also served by the Northeast Regional Train Line.